This is Let Me Sum Up, your regular deep dive into recent reports on climate and energy. I'm Luke Menzel, recording on Bidjigal and Gadigal country, and for this, our 100th episode spectacular, I'm delighted to be recording in person here in Sydney with my two co-hosts. It's Global Vice President for Marketing and Extortion at the Let Me Sum Up podcast, Frankie Muscovich. Hello, Frankie.
Hello, gentlemen. Happy 100 episodes, guys. It is so delightful to be sharing space in the same room. It doesn't happen often enough for us, and this feels like a really special milestone for this. Actually, your drinks last night, Luke, someone, and I can't remember who it was, so they'll have to out themselves to us at some point, suggested what could be more fun for the pod is that we're building Lego together while we chat. And I was like, did you know
As it turns out,
actually exactly where this started? About 4 years ago.
Yes. So for context, we're recording on the sidelines of the EC National Conference. We had our gala dinner last night. Mm-hmm. And so no doubt that was where that comment was made. Yeah, back in the day, policy crafting circle, a COVID-era mental health call where we caught up on a Friday and we each crafted.
We did.
I Legoed.
I painted little tiny plastic figures.
And I started crocheting granny squares and then transitioned into more outdoorsy gardening kind of exploits. Yeah.
Because in New South Wales, as I understand it, you're allowed to go outside during COVID.
Well, certainly into our backyard. Like, yikes, that was kind of scary and confronting to watch at a distance. But you know, some good stuff amongst all the shit that you guys lived through came out of it, and maybe this is one of them.
It certainly is. We're also joined by a man who, while on said conference stage yesterday, made a blanket apology to the many people in the room who have emailed him and have not received a response. It is Tennant Reid.
And I wish to extend that apology to all people who may be listening to this podcast and the greater population of the planet Earth who throughout the world are united in my non-response to their emails. It's nothing personal.
And then I think in that moment we both shared that quite a few people in conversation with either of ourselves,
like you and I, Frankie, yes,
often remark that they're kind of worried about Tennant because they never hear back from him via emails, and do we know or could we pass a message along?
Oh, look, I think I could have quite a lucrative side hustle in connecting people to Tennant.
That's right. Actually, what you didn't realise is where your EAs at large.
Oh, man.
Not that we're actually following through on that and being effective, but we could be if you chose
so
to
it's actually our
activate.
fault. You should blame us.
Look, there's only one person at fault in all of this, and that is me. But now, gentle listener, that you know what an absolute stone-cold disaster of an email inbox manager I am, in future, if you send me an email, that's on you.
You know, you're basically just inviting people to corner you in rooms when they find you in person now. But anyway, that's a problem for another day. That's a problem for future Tennant.
Can't wait.
That is a problem for future Tennant. On this, our 100th episode spectacular, we are once again doing the Ask Me Anything format. We, as regular listeners will know, invited you to send in your questions, comments, concerns, ruminations. We did receive a bunch of questions, but we also received some well wishes, which we're gonna play a few of those over the course of the episode. One of the things that I didn't anticipate when we started the show was that we would collect some fairly high profile listeners along the way. But even I was surprised when we received this voice note.
Hello, Governor. I got a telegram here for Let Me Sum Up.
What is
Hello. Queen Elizabeth II here. Now that my son Charles has taken over the duty of sending telegrams for 100th birthdays, I have started a side hustle in sending telegrams for 100th podcast episodes throughout the Commonwealth. I am so pleased to know you're celebrating your 100th episode. I send my congratulations and best wishes to you on such a special occasion. I would also like to request one of your Energy Sovereignty Now t-shirts, size L, colour pink. Given that I am sovereign, indeed the sovereign and your sovereign, I think it is appropriate. Please supply it promptly, else I shall direct the royal executioner to cut off your heads. Best wishes, and once again, thank you for your contributions to the Commonwealth.
Wow.
I'm actually speechless. That's so great.
I expected messages from all across this wide brown land, but not from beyond the grave.
But I now feel like we have to come up with the goods and find out her preferred delivery address, or
That's
else
true.
who knows what kind of karmic weirdness is coming our way.
I don't know where that came from.
You don't know who sent that in?
I have no idea. It came via the website.
Oh my!
And the
Well
the
played.
name
Well played.
was Queen Elizabeth II.
I fear that we have now established
Yep.
that
It's possible to send anonymous voicemails.
the Let Me Sum Up podcast website has established itself as a venue for untraceable, potentially illegal communications in absolute anonymity. I don't think even our Vice President of Marketing and Extortion will be coming up with plans to exploit that capability to its fullest.
This is sort of so far beyond the KPIs I had set myself in this role. I'm feeling delighted actually with that result.
Well,
Dead sovereign.
thank you, Ghost of Queen Elizabeth II / that anonymous listener that went to all that effort. That was an absolute delight.
What a banger. The accent was pretty great.
Yes.
She got the royal inflection remark. Anyway, hats off. I hope you have a genuine side hustle as Queen Elizabeth II. I mean, I don't know, at trivias or something, but that is a talent that should not go to waste or just wasted on us LMSU folks.
All right. We're now going to move from Her Majesty to a Minister of the Crown.
Ooh.
Hi, Summerupperers. Chris Bowen here, long-time listener, one-time caller. 100 episodes, eh? Congratulations, team, for filling a vital hole in the market, a clear market failure over lack of Australian podcasts on esoteric climate reports. But it's been a remarkable success, hence Luke Menzel is now known as the Joe Rogan of Australia. Might be time for a bit of a refresh, change the brand a bit, maybe the rest is climate, something like that. Might just help you along to the 200th episode, but congratulations, team. Wonderful job. It's great listening. Well done.
How does that land with you, Joe Rogan?
Yeah, not that great. But if there's a market failure, that obviously implies there's a need for government intervention
That's right.
to incentivise the creation of podcasts.
So our comment back to you, Minister Chris Bowen, is why are you and the Australian government not paying for this podcast?
It's beyond question that a strategic podcast reserve is essential in the event that foreign, unreliable, imported podcasts suddenly become interrupted in supply. And indeed, Joe Rogan could be replaced by the looking even better in a T-shirt Luke Menzel.
How many papers in the form of episodes need to be held in such a strategic reserve?
90 days of papers at all times. And the International Energy Agency can supply those papers as well as the obligation, I think.
Want to acknowledge the feedback on the suggestion for marketing tweaks or rebranding, but I think you underestimate our commitment to the old Princess Bride pop culture reference. So, like it or not, Minister, I think we're sticking with Let Me Sum Up.
But I do want to give kudos to the Minister for getting through that entire tribute without revealing how many batteries have been installed in this nation over the last 15 minutes. That must have taken some self-control. All right, shall we answer some questions, gang?
Yes.
Yeah, let's. Why not?
All right, so let's go to our first question.
Hi, this is Clare McLaughlin. I'm so excited for the 100th episode of the podcast that's been essential listening since I found myself in Energyland in 2023. Listening to the three of you talk about how much work was going on, all the reviews, reports, progress was absolutely mandatory when I was trying to get my head around all of those things. My question, and conscious it's Senate Estimates Weeks, this is not a Dorothy Dixer, is what big bits do you think are still missing that there needs to be more policy work kicked off on?
Well, given Claire has just retired from her role in the Federal Department of Climate Change, I can only interpret this as adding to the to-do list for her former colleagues.
That's right. I'm sure they're all saying thanks. I've got a few things to put on the list.
Yes. What do you got?
Like, I'm also conscious, we're having this conversation at a moment in time, so of course I'm a little bit impacted by the zeitgeist in some of this. The first thing I need to say is that work on adaptation policy is so behind where we need it to be. It needs to get to in the next little while. Mm-hmm. And I worry, and it's not, I don't really say that as a criticism necessarily. There is so much to do. Everyone is already stretched impossibly thin across such a huge kind of scope of work on the mitigation side of the coin. But I fear we're always one El Nino cycle or natural disaster away from having that reality confront us yet again and see, and so find ourselves reacting to that rather than knowing we've prepared for this. We've kind of done the thinking beforehand around how we can act to mitigate those risks and start to adapt ourselves to climate change we know is baked in. And I don't want us to stay in this kind of constant cycle of, oh my God, this is terrible. Look at all those homes that have burned down, houses that are flooded and unlivable, uninsurable, etc., and money getting chucked at disaster recovery and not at the things that might prevent worse or that level of impact from disasters in the first place. So that's thing number one on my list, and it's a big thing. It's like the whole mitigation agenda flipped over. The whole space needs some focus and fleshing out. One other thing I'll say on the mitigation front, I think as we're kind of going into a year where we've got some big ticket policy reviews, we've got the safeguard mechanism review, you've got the review of the vehicle efficiency standard and kind of roiling debates around gas taxes and diesel fuel tax credits and things like that. One of the things I think we're going to find ourselves talking about is the response in some places that if we push too hard on these things without other things in place, we will lose industry or we will lose competitiveness and there won't be industry left to transition and do the Future Made in Australia agenda. We're just at this maybe increasingly feel as a bit of a precarious moment where I think, the climate movement will want to see strong outcomes on those things, on those reviews, because we need to see momentum across the board, right? If we're to meet the targets that the government has set. And so I think a stronger focus on the sort of demand side measures that are pulling through things like low carbon liquid fuels, green commodities. We don't have those. We've got the production supply side measures in the Future Made agenda, but we don't yet have the matching demand side policy signals in all those places. It's a really big one, and I could go on, but that's one that I feel will come up in the context of some of these other reviews because the risk or the counter kind of narrative you could see coming through is that we're pushing too hard without the industries that we hope to pivot existing ones to. They're not there yet. They're not ready. Yeah. And I could go on, but I'll stop there.
Well, look, shockingly, I observe that as of today, Australia does not have a active policy in place to equalise at the border the carbon imposts that policy places on domestic production of certain products versus imported production. I have heard of a solution to this issue, and I leave the identity of that solution as an exercise for the advanced listener.
No, don't you need to collect? Like, aren't we trying to make BOCA a thing?
Just a carbon border adjustment, adjusting carbon at the border.
You know, that sounds like a great idea. So I will, as that was a wholly predictable answer, I will say I reckon we have an unfilled gap around the area of overshoot policy. So we have a policy agenda that has been evolving towards sufficiency on achieving net zero. By 2050, by 2045, if you're in Victoria, a hard job in either place and a politically, Australia or Victoria, and a politically more treacherous ground today than it was 3 or 4 years ago. But it's also the fact that globally, the world is not on track to stay within the 1.5 degrees Paris goal. Staying within 2 degrees is more feasible, but we're not on track currently for that either. And so this is going to force more and more confrontation of the question of overshooting those targets and then coming back into consistency with those goals. Or not, just achieving a higher level, suffering a higher level of climate change.
Well, in which case you need to get real about the level of adaptation
absolutely,
you're
yes.
comfortable with.
Yes. Or, just pretend that it's not happening. Not a wonderful solution. In the land of overshoot, well, that brings us to, how much overshoot, for how long, how do we adapt to the temporary but maybe
severe
and temporary maybe for several decades impacts of that level, and how do you magic up the gargantuan industries that would do the negative emissions to bring you back in? Or are you talking about geoengineering? And these are all horrible topics. And there's a reason why there hasn't been that much discussion of them.
Yeah.
They'll take some policy.
I wonder whether, and I know there are smart people out there thinking about this and doing work in this space on removals, and where are the areas of policy or technologies, whatever that you need to start thinking about now. It would be well articulated and, kind of put on the table a very powerful push towards actually doing the bloody mitigation now, so that you're not having to pay
reverse moral
whatever
hazard.
the eye-watering costs today in terms of MPV that some of those solutions would present. Don't pretend like there's a cheap solution waiting for you if we don't do all the stuff that is hard but relatively more cost-effective now.
I will just lob one more thing onto the policy agenda, which I don't think there's anywhere near enough focus from any level of government really on the skills that we need as an economy to power the transition. We obviously need to pull in a huge number of new trades and apprentices. We just need more boots on the ground to fix all the stuff and make it climate ready, climate resilient, decarbonised. But ultimately, every job in a net zero economy is a climate job, and everybody's going to need to bring those skills to bear. And so this is going to touch every profession. And I just see in governments around the country siloing between climate and energy policy and skills policy. And if you're in a skills portfolio, this is just one thing that is exercising your mind. And so it's somewhere on the list of top 10 things, but often nowhere near the top. But it's absolutely critical. And I think more connective tissue and more active engagement between ministers and departments that have carriage of the climate and energy agenda and the skills, education, training agenda is going to be really, really important. And as part of that, not just, TAFEs and universities, but also how we upskill professionals and trades that are already in the market, because that's what's going to have the impact in the immediate term.
Oh, I've got more.
We have many more questions to answer. This is literally the first question, so maybe you can fill Claire in outside of the podcast.
Maybe you can send Claire an anonymous voice note.
All right. Our next question is from Erwin Jackson.
Hi, Tennant, Frankie and Luke. Congratulations on 100 episodes. What a great achievement, and credit to you all. My question is, and I promise not to troll Tennant about integrated assessment modelling.
They suck.
I think he just did.
Consider me trolled.
But based on the conclusions of the technical chapter on governance in the National Climate Risk Assessment, what would be the one policy reform you would instigate in Australia to improve our adaptation response? Again, love to all. You're doing fantastic work and looking forward to hearing the answer. Take care, Erwin.
So what do you reckon? What's the one policy reform?
Well, it's CBAM.
For adaptation.
Okay, it's not CBAM. No. I do have an idea, though, which is the thing, the dream that I think we've discussed before, which is a really important chunk of adaptation is lifting the quality of the existing stock of housing. Mm-hmm. That is, with any technology and labour force that we can bring to bear on it, a really tedious, big enterprise. And it has seemed the last several times we've had a major economic slowdown, like it would be a good idea to be doing a bunch of upgrades with underutilised people from the construction sector. But whenever that thought has occurred to people, there hasn't been a rapidly spin-upable way for government to do that while having some confidence in the quality and safety of the enterprise. And so the idea is forming the small but perfectly formed core of a program that does do an ongoing, year in, year out, modest number of upgrades, but has the procedures, the panels of providers or trusted companies involved, the governance to scale up rapidly when macroeconomic circumstances are suitable for it, so that there is actually a readily to hand lever for government to pull if they feel the need to shove money out the door. That would be nice.
Can I add something to that idea and then put my own out there? Because I +1 on that. The PC had, sort of highlighted this as well in their net zero work. It's and I had a lot of conversations with them about this, and it goes to this kind of there is a big and good overlap between mitigation and adaptation outcomes when it comes to housing upgrades, right? Heat stress, one of the biggest climate hazards for us to consider across the country into the future. So bloody insulating your house more is not just getting emissions down and reducing energy consumption. It's an adaptation measure too. I think we should have had a mandatory disclosure regime for energy performance of homes 20 years ago, or at least 10 years ago, and we're hopefully maybe finally on the cusp of that. My view is that should include a measure of resilience alongside, because those two things need to work together. If you have a disclosure regime, you are creating more of an incentive and flow-on impacts from an upgrades program, which should hopefully result in just more kind of consistent market signals and should result in, reduced insurance premiums, things that would make a genuine measurable difference to people's cost of living as well.
Well, it helps solve the issue that we identified when we were looking at the big adaptation reports that came out last year, that there is absolutely no way government can pay for all of this effort. So if you want private capital to flow in to these spaces, you need some sort of benchmark and sort of to signal what people are solving for, and for there to be value that's able to be made transparent around that. And that's one of the things that ratings would do. If we were able to roll ratings out around the country and there was a measure not just of efficiency but also resilience, as people's minds get more focused on this topic, they can go for the high resilient building, and that'll be valued in the market. That provides an incentive for people to invest, gets the money flowing into the adaptation activities.
Yeah. My idea, it's related, and I'm prefacing this with, if the politics of it all wasn't a problem, I think a consistent approach to land use planning frameworks on where stuff is built and to what standard would negate a lot of the future problems of the fact that we have built a bunch of housing in floodplains across vast amounts of Western Sydney, for example, just to pick one example. And it's true that at the time those future climate risks weren't properly understood, or if they were, there was nowhere near the kind of political or other motivation to change anything. Like the imperative to house Australians has and I think will continue to be stronger for the while. But I do think there are some sensible things you could do, and this is this requires, ideally, because you don't get stuff like cheaper insurance and stuff like that unless there's some consistency in the way that this is applied across the country. The propensity has been to focus on building the technical standards that you build buildings to, right? Because it's an easy, you can point at the National Construction Code, and that's a thing that you can influence maybe a bit more easily, although I would contend that. But where does the stuff get built in the first place is not a strategic conversation that has been had in any meaningful way across the country. And that is really hard. I am not underestimating that, but we are going to need to have in this country of the coming decade this conversation about the best and highest use of land for different things. I'm invoking the example for housing because it's going to be the one that lands, I think, the biggest for the electorate, because we've also made housing a wealth creation vehicle in this country. So the stakes are very high for people. So much of people's personal wealth is tied up in these assets. So unscrambling that egg is going to take a huge amount of effort and a lot of time, but that is the thing that I would do.
And I would just add formally tasking the Climate Change Authority with ongoing oversight and advice in this space. I think would be incredibly helpful to provide that independent voice championing a topic which can all too easily go by the wayside. All right, let's go to our next question.
Hi, let me sum up. My name's Julian from Melbourne, keen listener, and thought I would submit a question about resilience and electrification. Obviously, as a result of the Middle East conflict, there's been much more awareness of the problems of the long supply chains that run to Australia, and accordingly a push for more resilience and, from a climate perspective, more electrification. The technologies that we would use for this include things like batteries and solar panels, and countries that seek to increase their resilience by shifting towards electrification may find that they are a lot more reliant on a different supply chain for such products, that being products from China, which particularly in batteries absolutely dominates production. And so I'm wondering, are we switching one geopolitical risk for another? Is there anything companies can do to reduce the potential ramifications of any conflict in Taiwan or political change in China?
So this is a big, juicy question because in global clean tech, like to a first approximation, China is it in most of the product categories, electric vehicles also being an important one. And I have some contradictory thoughts here. My first thought is no, we're not swapping one vulnerability, at least not for an equally sized one.
Because it's existing already?
True. But also because when your trade requirement is an ongoing flow of oil or gas. I mean, we're not importing gas. Many countries are importing gas. If that flow stops, all of your stuff using that fuel stops immediately. If you are adopting electric vehicles or solar panels or big batteries or small batteries or whatever else, for the company or the person who is using that product, it's a long time between drinks in your reliance on the supply chain. So if there were to be an interruption in trade through the Straits of Malacca, people who are in need of a new car will have the kind of bad time that people had in that stage of the pandemic when chips were in short supply and car supply chains blew out. But all the existing cars keep working until they don't work. So, like, I don't know, that feels like lower vulnerability to me. The harder to answer question mark is the question of the information security of and remote interferability of connected devices. And some really far-out, paranoid-sounding claims about that have been heard from some security-minded people over the past year, to the effect that the government of China is listening to you, or just could be listening to you when you are in or near a Chinese-made EV, or the even more bold claim that every single Chinese EV is a bomb on wheels waiting to be detonated when the big red button in Beijing is pushed. That stuff is a little difficult to give a 100% definitive no to, because like a lot of existing devices have been interfered with by intelligence agencies in like small batches or small cases. There's been a lot happening in recent times, but if anybody remembers the detonation of a significant part of the senior leadership of, and in some cases family members of, Hezbollah by pages used by the command structure there, and which Israel had interfered with the supply chain of in China, like that could actually happen to any product. It's not a world in which one feels totally secure. My only response to that stuff, though, in the case specifically of does China have a big red button to control everything, is if that were true, it would probably be one of the most crazily self-destructive bits of negating your own industrial policy that has ever been conceived in the history of humankind. China is exporting hundreds of billions of dollars a year worth of clean tech products. Those markets would evaporate as fast as alternate supply chains could be magicked up if it were actually the case that every inverter could be switched off, every EV could be remotely brought to a halt. And it would also be an enormous vulnerability inside China. So I am dubious, but in the history of the world, people have indeed done stupid, self-destructive things from time to time.
You don't say. The only thing I would add is that I think that it's a risk, but it's a risk that can be mitigated. And I think one of the things we need to think carefully about is perhaps less onshoring, although there may be parts of the supply chain that we want to hold here in Australia from a strategic context, but friendshoring, sort of looking at ways of making sure that we're not completely reliant on any one country, actually, and that we are working with allies to have strategic parts of the supply chain that can be scaled up if necessary, but isn't, and that is like an investment that we're willing to make to shore up our strategic position.
The only thing I want to say about this is that I just feel the need to keep cautioning us climate folk that we can be very blinkered in the way we consider some of these things. And there are other impacts of reorienting supply chains. Like I am specifically talking about human rights and labour conditions for people in supply chains. And like it's, you know, it is just hard to acknowledge that. But unless you are focused on it, you're not going to make a positive difference on that side of things either. So, you know, I think people who want to weaponize that are already alive to that. Those rakes are being stepped on, like, as you speak, with all of that. And that's unlikely to change unless there is sort of, you know, coordinated, collaborative, positive effort to increase transparency where, you know, like China being a bit of a black box to most people outside the country, particularly people who buy products in large quantities. Like they're just... There's a lot of stuff that goes on to shield view of questionable labour practices, modern slavery in supply chains. Like it's very hard to get at the truth of it all, even if you're making a concerted effort. But you're definitely not going to find it if you're not even looking. So I don't, you know, I think if it was easy, more would be happening, right? But I just, you know, I think we need to be pursuing change for the better at the same time. And it does concern me sometimes when I hear climate folks disregard that as a serious issue.
There's also definitely not able to be resolved in the scope of this Ask Me Anything. And in fact, the question wasn't asked. But related to this, the important question.
Are we asking ourselves questions now?
No, I swear not.
You have a plane to catch, Ken.
That's true. But the broader issues of China as maker of everything and the contraction that requires in the making of those things, of things in general by other economies, that the level of sustained and indeed increasing economic imbalances within China and in the global economy, like, is a big deal. And sort of regardless of the specifics of do we trust or not trust the supply chains, those questions do have to be addressed. And like maybe in future we can discuss a Michael Petit paper or something about China's imbalances, because for climate purposes, a future in which at some point China rebalances, has lower savings rates, lower investment rates, is not automatically the natural place to dominate whatever new field of manufacturing there is a pretty... It's a world with some risks for climate transition because of how much of the transition is made in China now, but it's also one with great opportunities, including if Australia's potential advantages as a maker of renewables-intensive commodity exports were ever to actually matter, it would be in a world where China doesn't have just an infinite flow of cheap risk-tolerant capital going to expanding conventional steel making or eventually low emission steel making, but one where Chinese supply chains worry about their own competitiveness and are interested in the idea of offshoring to Australia the most energy intensive parts of that. So that would be an interesting set of questions. It's okay that we weren't asked about that. But hey, maybe for episode 150.
There we go. Yeah, we'll table that one for another 50 episodes. Our next question is from Georgina Woods.
My question is about the gas industry, of course. We hear a lot about gas as a transition fuel. It's been talked about as a bridge for at least a quarter of a century in Australia. But given the physical properties of gas, how it requires large volumes and high pressure to transport and keep, and given its economic profile, being used in small amounts for lucrative purposes in uneven volumes at different times, and given that it also requires quite a lot of money to extract once we have to start resorting to unconventional drilling and fracking to get at the gas, given all of that, my question is, can Australia have a small gas industry? And supplementary question, if you'll allow me, is if the answer to that is yes, how is a small gas industry to be financed and managed so that gas gets to the most important uses? And if the answer is no, how do we jump off the bridge all in one heave?
Well, I'd hope we'd be trundling to the other side of the bridge in a very rapid fashion rather than jumping off it.
Sure. So there's kind of a threshold question that Georgina is posing, which is kind of like, well, if we accept the premise that that gas will have a small role, that implies a smaller gas industry. But does that even make any sense, given the economics of gas?
I think the paper that we talked about recently about minimum viable scale for
super interesting, right?
fossil industries, extremely, extremely relevant. And when network effects go into reverse and it gets progressively more annoying to be a customer of a system or a user of a system because other people are dropping off or volumes are decreasing, you will find out in a maybe uncomfortable hurry which users are really viable when the costs they start accelerating. So you could make an argument that at least for some of the major use cases for gas, maybe there isn't a small industry option. That's tricky. I think so. Gas-powered generation.
So that's the one I was going to jump in on because it's like we've talked about this on and off since we've been doing the pod, right? And the thing that's like starting to look more certain is that chunk of whatever the bridging role is that gas is playing is being eaten into by batteries, and almost certainly at a faster rate than would have been, envisaged a few years ago. So, like, is there enough scale, in whatever the battery piece, is not going to do? That's going to come down to how much, basically how much they'll be able to charge for it, noting that in the, in the NEM review, they've kind of specifically identified that as a particular use case that requires its own design mechanism, basically, which means you could have a ring fence, that would be priced differently. And it's kind of hard to know, just how expensive is it going to be to build and maintain gas peakers and keep extracting the very small slice of what you'd need.
6 o'clock in the evening is going away as a market for gas flexibility services in the power system.
Yeah.
Winter is a harder nut to crack, and then the once in a blue moon when you've got a couple of weeks of low wind and short days and high heating demand, that's a harder nut still.
Yeah.
And that backup role is the one that stays around the longest in the models. But yeah, if that backup role has to, like, you could design a policy mechanism to throw money at peakers to keep them around playing that role. But if that money has to cover the cost of not just building and maintaining the peaker, and not just the gas that it burns when it's operating, but the absolute security of supply of the gas for when it might be needed at any time, and the storage for that, and the pipelines for that, and the production of that, and other things are falling away, and it's all being paid for just through this one role, then that's probably become quite a brittle. Like, if anything else can come along that can scrape away at that role, it will look really
falls
good.
over. Yeah.
That's just about the relative economics, right?
Yeah.
You know, what are the alternatives, and is it cheaper to lean into them rather than maintaining this legacy energy infrastructure?
Yeah. And we should all be hoping that as we come out of the latest global fuel crisis that we found ourselves in, there is more awareness and attention on the fact that other use cases of gas, like burning it to heat homes, water, cook stuff, that can be done more cost effectively with electricity in this country. And so I guess the other thing I was going to say, which I'm no expert on, it does then kind of invoke well, can we have a small gas industry sort of implies the main follow-on question is, well, what's the export market look like? Because that, like the economics of electrification in a lot of use cases in Australia are very, very attractive, right? And hopefully things like these fuel crises are resulting in more people buying EVs, more people electrifying their homes, bringing forward those end-of-life equipment replacement decisions, because, like, fuck, that looks way cheaper over there. I don't have the best insights as to how well or potent that is emerging in other countries that we supply our gas to. So for me, it sort of depends on a bit of the geopolitics of it all, really.
That, and also, so you've got the export market piece of this, because if those extractive industries are being maintained to support an export market, then domestic gas use can leverage off that. But also, like, over what time frame are we transitioning our own industries away from gas? And depending on the kind of the complete ecosystem of gas uses, its availability for things like generation will make more or potentially much less sense. It's an ecosystem, right?
Yeah. And like maybe the other sort of thing we've talked about on the way through, it's sort of sometimes we kind of forget the carbon pricing bit of all of this as well. Well,
carbon pricing?
I'll look it up.
Tell me if I'm just stupid here, because like frequently this is the case in conversations like this. But
this is a lie.
What are you talking about?
I sort of come back to, like, if actually countries are broadly following, and not fast enough or whatever, but are following the trajectory they've set for themselves on emissions reduction commitments, like gas emissions have to be offset. And at the moment, like, so, there is no enduring gas industry into the future unless their emissions are effectively offset.
Particularly if we don't believe, even people of a constitution willing to believe, don't believe anymore in the widespread deployment of carbon capture and storage on power and industry.
That's what I'm getting to, right? Because that has not proved to be a thing that's working at scale yet.
People will argue about working, but it's not a commercial wonderland.
No. So I wonder if into the future, presumably, any policy device that is pricing carbon across the economy, it's going up, it's not going down. The price of carbon is not reducing over time from here on out. So the economics of that also only get harder. And that's another overlay that's just sort of, mostly ignored in conversations like this because you're kind of, focused on the economics of the use case. But that's another thing that's going to impact the and you would hope with time, right? Because the other thing I would say here is that, gas emissions are not accounted for well enough in this country. Seems to be growing and more widespread sort of evidence and views that, those emissions are underreported. Therefore, they're not being offset effectively because the companies that emit them are only buying ACCUs or, doing whatever for the stuff that they actually measure and report. So, that's only going to get harder.
All right. Next question.
This is Anna Hancock. To the summation chiefs, who do you each credit as your most admired thought leader on any matter relating to system transition?
I've got two thoughts on this one.
Two thought leaders? Or two
yes,
thoughts?
Absolutely. two thought leaders with two very different thoughts. One thought leader is Paul Atreides, the Kwisatz Haderach, the protagonist of Frank Herbert's Dune, who, in the midst of a life or death duel, while in the midst of coming into full awareness of his psychic precognitive powers, perceives that to not act is as much an action that changes the future as to make a choice to act. There is no way to not have an impact, and so you are just left with the choice of how best to act. My other thought, and thought leader, who I wish to cite, and whose insights I often think of, but you will be glad to hear, do not consistently apply in my own life, is Niccolo Machiavelli in The Prince, who says, men must be either pampered or crushed, for they can get revenge for small injuries, but not for large ones. So if you must do a man an injury, let it be of such kind that there is no recovering from it. That could be thought of as a guide to system transition if you don't intend to actually crush somebody. Try not to do them little annoying injuries that will piss them off and make them your enemy. And then I guess if you're really committed, then salt the earth.
I just want to share for our listeners at home that Tennant was not reading that quote. That just rolled straight out of the old noggin.
It's in my heart.
Wow.
Niccolo Machiavelli didn't have anything to say about email, though.
I really struggle with this because actually, when I think about, when I read the question, and I couldn't jump to probably a bit like you, Janet, in just sort of going, I guess, a little bit more philosophical. I kind of similarly, it doesn't go to Machiavelli, but
soft.
No, but I think my consistent interest or passion in how I think about climate policy always comes back to governance and ethics. Not that I'm realising that while saying it, but I think it really does inform how I think about policy making. I come at it, I think, from that lens. So, over the years, I have really enjoyed, and I've spoken about him before on this pod, but reading things that Michael Sandel writes, so political philosopher based out of Harvard, does a really excellent, you can find it on YouTube, I should link it, like a 101 of political philosophy. But his whole contribution, I guess, to the evolution of that kind of practice is very much like a riff on the sort of Socratic, like making, I guess, really leaning into the how do you create structures and make people very much a part of the, like, you know, it's sort of, I guess you could just, on one level you could call that classic democracy, but the way he kind of chooses to demonstrate that, if you like, is in getting roomfuls of people who don't agree with each other and asking thoughtful questions and getting them to ask other, like, it's a genuine dialogue. And like, I just think in times such as these, when we live in social media, you know, echo chambers, it's refreshing to see how genuine kind of engagement and consideration of other people's perspectives, like how that can look in practice. And of course, that's all lovely for a professor to be doing that in a, not theoretical, but, you know, like he's coming at it from that sort of perspective. But I really like the way he thinks about that. And I think that has definitely influenced maybe the way that I go about doing, like, sort of showing up. So yeah, I think I wanted to shout him out. And the other one that I also, just being a bit of a political nerd, so it's not relevant, it's not directly relevant to transition, but writers like George Megalogenis who kind of, you know, are not in the zeitgeist every day writing columns, but do a lot of deep thinking about demographic shifts in the country, kind of long run concerns and drivers, and, like, you know, I think we could all pay attention to thinking and insight like that, to think about who we're doing this for and how do we craft messages and policies that speak to those constituents. So anyway, those are mine.
I have two. Given the questions focused on systems transition, I thought of Ron Ben David. Ooh. And Ron, as a human who was there at the start of the national electricity market, knows how all of those structures, governance, to your point, Frankie, and the market mechanisms tick on an intimate level, but the flexibility of thinking to say, well, are they working? Are they serving their intended purpose? Could we be doing things differently? And to be that sometimes strident voice of contestation in the ecosystem, to challenge thinking and comfortable assumptions that because things are the way they are, they need be that way forevermore. I think that is an incredible contribution, and one that people like him who have that depth of knowledge are uniquely positioned to make, but not everyone that's been around the traps for that long has the flexibility of thought to make that contribution.
That's true.
So that's a very special role that he plays. The other person, which makes me a little bit sad to bring it up, but I want to give a shout out to dearly departed friend Chloe Munro. Yeah. Who we all knew a little bit. I got to know her quite well towards the end of her life. She passed away 5 years ago now.
Is it 5 years?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. A storied career, including head of Department of Natural Resources and Environment in Victoria back in the day. Many people that listen to this podcast would have come to know her in her role as chair of the Clean Energy Regulator, but just an outstanding human being, incredibly kind, mentored many people in our space, and there is no doubt that many of the people that I'm sure listeners at home regard as thought leaders of people that are making a difference. Their careers were in some way touched by the warmth and generosity of spirit and gentle challenge and contestation from Chloe. She made us all better, and she was taken away far too soon. So, but her legacy lives on. So yes.
Well, you two are lovely, and I appear to be a sociopathic monster. But on we go.
True colours being revealed on episode 100.
Go. All right. Let's see. Our next question is from one Beth Richards.
Hi, friends. In a hypothetical world where climate change has been solved, what other professions might you find yourselves in?
On the proviso that in this world energy has also become boring again, I would find myself dividing my time, I think, between scraping by as a professional dungeon master. That's tabletop role-playing games. I hasten 100%. To clarify for any suddenly scandalised listeners. A pizzaiolo and an ice cream maker.
I could totally see that for you, Tennant. Love that for you.
That sounds super fun. I had a sort of sliding doors moment in my 20s when I was choosing what to do for my postgraduate. I was kind of torn between doing a Masters of Publishing and a Masters of Environment at the University of Melbourne. I'd done political science and creative writing as my two majors for my Bachelor of Arts. And there were I really got interested in the climate of it all from a climate politics perspective. People like Robin Eckersley at the University of Melbourne kind of lit up my brain with kind of the consequence of the challenge that was before us. And I really loved writing. And yet I was like, how can I go and write poetry or write stories or edit books or whatever it is while I could be applying my skills in this other area? So I felt a sense of like responsibility and vocation to go in this other direction, and the rest is history.
And now you're the Joe Rogan of Australia.
Well, indeed.
You need more mixed martial arts practice in there, Luke.
Well, let's check in on my progress on that front in our 200th episode, shall we? But yeah, I don't know. Like, if climate change was genuinely solved, I think leaning into some of those other areas might be fun. But I would say that many of us that are sort of engaged in this space spend a lot of time thinking about storytelling, and so a lot of the skills and the impulses that I cultivated in my early studies get brought to bear in terms of finding the narrative, finding the way to genuinely communicate those ideas to people, and hopefully move hearts and minds along the way. What about you, Frankie?
I'm really split over this because, like, on the one hand, I think there's totally a universe in which I could have been like a hiking guide that takes people on multi-day hikes in beautiful parts of nature, because I'm a nature bird, and I think I've always known that that's what fills my cup, if you like. And I had the privilege to travel really widely when I was young, and that very much, like, the travel that I did in my early 20s put me on the path to working in this space, because I got exposed to so many, different cultures and natural beauty. And I sort of came back and I was doing engineering consulting and not focused on climate and ESG, but I could make a difference if I pivoted to that. And it's, as you say, the rest is history. So I think there could have been something in that for me, but more realistically, knowing what I do about how much enjoyment I get from the kind of team sport collaborative nature of what we do in the sort of policy world, I think I would probably be doing that in another field. like social policy or something like that. And it probably sort of ties nicely into my sort of governance and ethics kind of outlook on, or bent, if you like.
I agree. I think that's probably the actual answer. I mean, one of the reasons why I regard the climate bit of this as kind of like the meta problem needs to be solved is because there's so many other problems in society that need attention, but we need to solve the climate bit of it so that we have the runway to solve those problems. And so, yes, if we actually fix this thing, then it might be time to turn our attention to some of those other wicked problems. We now have a question from mega friend of the pod and sometime co-host, Alison Reeve.
Hey, LMSU crew, it's Alison here. My question for you guys on your 100th episode, congratulations, is this one. So when I was regularly co-hosting, I'd get people coming up to me at energy events to introduce themselves and to out themselves as a listener. And often this was delightful, and sometimes it was slightly weird because of the whole parasocial thing. But anyway, my question to you is, what has been your most delightful or most surprising encounter with a listener over the time that you've been podcasting? You don't have to name names, but I'm really curious. Congratulations on making it to 100 episodes, and I'm hoping and wishing that you have the energy and the time and the will to make another 100. I don't think you're going to run out of papers.
And we should do a massive shout out and thanks to you, Alison, for lending your epic talents to several of those 100 episodes. We love having you on.
Well, especially during your parental leave.
Absolutely.
Frankie.
Thank you for keeping this whole show going with Luke and Tennant while I was off doing that.
I was startled one day at the physio when my physio, a nice guy in his 20s, asked me if I had a podcast because he recognised the sound of my voice from driving with his dad while his dad listened to this podcast.
Yep.
Do you know who his dad is?
I do not. Well, he does not appear to be professionally an energy or climate person. But anyway, I was delighted.
Yeah, I have a similar story, which I reckon Frankie's going to pile in on, because when I was preparing my cosplay for the PAX Gaming convention last year, I found a costume shop in the northern suburbs of Melbourne, and on a Sunday morning, I took my son and my daughter in. I actually had most of my costume. I was at that point in the market for a wig and was just kind of trying to get my head around that whole part of the cosplaying universe. And the chap behind the counter in the cosplaying shop said, "Are you Luke Menzel?" I listened to your podcast, which was extremely random. But as it turns out, this gentleman day job was working in the Victorian government, had previously worked in either climate or energy, I can't remember, and was helping out, I think, his wife in the family's costume shop.
They own the business.
Right, and you know this because, Frankie.
I know this because unbeknownst to me that Luke had this interaction, I flew down to Melbourne
for an event not too long after.
No, the same one.
No, so I got my cosplay for the gaming convention.
But you then used it for our trivia night.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. So all right, fine. Effectively the same thing though. I flew down to Melbourne a bit freaked out because I had sparkly red fabulous Dorothy high heel shoes and no Dorothy outfit because I don't know, life, and I'd given myself no runway. So I was Googling costume shops.
So to be clear, this was for our Chaos Trivia.
Chaos Trivia.
With our friends at Currently Speaking that was held on the sidelines of the All Energy Conference. Tennant and I had perhaps foolhardily committed to wearing the cosplay from our recent adventure at the PAX Gaming Convention. And, of course, Frankie hates to be left out of anything.
That's right.
And so jumped right on board.
Well, I thought it would be weird if you guys were dressed up and I wasn't.
Sure.
And then I thought, what's the least offensive but fun cosplay I'd be up for? And I had the shoes, so I needed the outfit.
Sure.
And I rolled up to the same costume shop.
Not a recommendation from me.
I had no idea that Luke had been there, and I basically had the same conversation with this lovely bloke. He said, I spoke to Luke like 2 weeks ago, and he sent me a lovely message on LinkedIn afterwards, and that was like actually the best thing ever. So good, so good.
All right. We have one final question from a dear friend of the podcast and one-time co-host back on episode 51, Carlos Flores.
4 years ago, I was fortunate to be in this very small group of people who gave you feedback on episode 0, that secret test pilot that you never aired. And my feedback at the time was very simple. I was like, double down on the banter because it's so great, but cut down in length because the episode was like 2 hours long. And 100 episodes later, I feel like the energy from your geeky jokes, cliche power, a small city, it's awesome. 6,000 banter. As for brevity, you made great progress. 5 out of 6 stars, very good. There's always there another level, a stretch target, a stretch goal that you can reach. But you guys are amazing. I'm fully charged, loving every episode. And my question to you is, will you ever release that secret pilot episode?
I think the answer to that is a big yes.
God. I didn't. Do we have it?
We do.
Oh my God. What did we even talk about?
Well, I'll leave the question of what the papers were. There was
papers.
There is a bit of overlap with, I think, our first episode, because I think we reused some of the content.
Because it was the industry
chapter of
the IPCC 6th Assessment Report.
Correct. So I think we talked about it again, or we'll use some of the same audio, but there's a bunch of it which is new. Like the intro is weird. My normal standard intro is not there. I'm talking about, instead of recent reports on climate and energy, I talk about recent reports from tweets to tomes or something like that.
Ooh.
And then we have a whole section. So what I wanted to remind you guys is that our original concept was that the opening segment would be something called Executive Summary, where all three of us would read another report that wasn't the main report we were talking about, and then we would explain what was in that other report to each other.
Yeah.
Which I think fell kind of flat because it just was us explaining reports to each other, and then the other person was going, sounds interesting. But
I can see where the 2-hour time frame kind of blew out too.
Well, I think maybe it just felt like 2 hours because the pilot episode I found was 1 hour.
Okay. Gosh. That's so great.
But anyway, what I want to suggest to you two is that we release this pilot episode as this week's bonus content, so that our super Summerupperers can go and listen to this artifact of the early history of the Let Me Sum Up podcast.
I approve this circular economy initiative.
Oh, that's so great. Oh, I'm totally here for it. I have no memory other than industry stuff featured in that discussion. It'll be a delight to listen back to it.
We're a little green. But
great.
You can see what was gestating there was a beautiful thing. I'm glad we did a pilot.
I remember sending it to people for feedback.
Yep.
I know when I had a whole survey thing that I was filling out too. Like I was trying to be really structured about it. I remember duration was a fairly constant bit of feedback.
Yes. Yeah. Well, some challenges are enduring.
Where are we at right now?
I dare not say.
Oh, no.
as always, and again, on this our 100th episode, we will close out the show with one more thing. But on this occasion, we're going to play 3 well wishes. So you won't be hearing from us. You'll be hearing from friends of the podcast, listeners to the podcast that were kind enough to share some kind words. First up, we've got a message from ClimateWorks Centre CEO, Anna Skarbek.
Dear Let Me Sum Up our podcast gurus. Congratulations on your 100th episode. It is such a good service that you provide. I reckon you're national treasures, really. Not only is it really useful to have these complex papers summarised in an audio form for us, but it's also really nice to drop in and join your friendly chat. It's like catching up with friends even when life is busy and we can't actually catch up. I love listening and being part of the conversation in my ears, if not in the room. I reckon I've listened to all of the 100, if not close. $10 a month seems a ridiculously good value bargain for this wonderful service. So please keep it up.
T-shirt.
Thank you very much. From Anna Skarbek.
Can we quote you on that, Anna, on a T-shirt?
I think we need to put a testimonial on our website. Our next message is from Productivity Commissioner Barry Sterland.
Hi, Frankie Tennant and Luke. Congrats on the 100th episode of the pod. What a fabulous achievement. You've really become a mainstay of the climate and energy policy community. Wait for those eps to drop and have a listen. You read papers so that we don't have to. You delight in papers that we then need to read. And sometimes you get annoyed at papers so that we don't have to. When, as one writing papers, people will no doubt wait nervously for the review from a Stratton and Pomerantz type crowd. There's 3 of you. But it's always fair, and the challenges are well made, so, thanks for that. I've really loved the sharpness of the pod. I like the fact that you really care about good policy, and that comes through, and really enjoy the humour and the friendliness. So, as you extend this Princess Bride-like quest, all the best for the next 100 episodes. Really enjoy your work. Thanks, guys.
So lovely, Barry. And now we get to be the Pomerantz and Stratton to your Rogan.
Wow.
2 great tastes that taste great together.
That's right.
Moving on to our final message,
I'm not letting it go.
which is from one Tom Quinn.
Just calling in from Seoul to wish you all a very happy 100 episodes, and a very big thank you for the amazing collective public service you provided to us all with your variety of pithy, insightful and intellectually scathing reviews of the reports, good, bad and ugly out there. You've no doubt saved us loyal listeners probably years of collective labour in reading these reports otherwise. So again, just a very big congratulations. I love your work, and to listeners out there, make sure you sign up, grab a shirt, keep supporting these guys so we get another 100 years, 100 episodes, more listening ahead of us. Thanks, guys. Bye.
I think our well-wishers have done your extortion job for you this episode, Frankie.
Thanks, team. I mean, isn't that the... that just feels like a perfect encapsulation of the delight that we get all the time, right? And when we're running into these people who are eminences and thought leaders in their own right, it's incredibly humbling and lovely to get that kind of feedback and messages from all of you. So I just want to, in thanking you for taking on the extortion part of my job today, just want to thank everyone that tunes in to this show. We're here kind of doing this for you, right? Like I said this on a LinkedIn post last week, but one of the main reasons I still love doing this pod is that we get programmed time to hang out together. You're 2 of my favourite humans, And I think the other main reason we're all still really committed to this is because of all those messages that we continue to get via socials, out in the wild when we meet you at conferences and all of it. So so thank you for that.
Yes. 100%.
Co-signed. That is our show for today. For the full back catalogue of all 100 episodes of the Let Me Sum Up podcast, you can visit letmesumup.net. This podcast was edited by energy professional and podcaster tragic Marcus Spencer from Here Media Studio. You can, of course, support the podcast, as some of our well-wishers have pointed out, by visiting that same website. Or if you want to keep it simple and you are a user of Apple Podcasts, you can subscribe to the show and get all of that sweet, sweet boco, including the 0th episode, the pilot, which will be going up this week.
Oh, I'm scared.
But for now, for the 100th time, it is my great pleasure to say, for Frankie Muskovich and Tennant Reid, I'm Luke Menzel. Thanks for listening, and we will talk to you again soon.
I just teared up a little bit. That was so lovely.
Yes, it was.
Oh.